Okay, so you all saw the title. This is going to be a slightly different video from all of my trading stuff. In fact, it has nothing to do with my trading. Before I start, I want you to know that I'm not doing this video for any other reason than to spread information about a chronic condition that has struck many millions of people as a result of long COVID and COVID complications. For my clients and my traders, you know that nothing will change. I will always be there for you. And I'm finding ways to manage this horrible affliction. And I wanted to share my experience, first-hand experience, what worked, what didn't work. If you want to jump straight into that, I've put chapters down below so that you can go to that part easier. But this video is about me sharing what I've learned so far in the hope that you may recognize your own symptoms and maybe try some of the things that are helping me right now. Those of you who are members of this channel, I talk about my condition every so often on my live stream, so you know I've been struggling with long COVID on and off for probably about 3 years now. I first got COVID, I think it was the end of March 2020, so at the very beginning of the outbreaks. And I know it was COVID because 2 of my very close friends I saw on that same week, and all 3 of us, they work in retail, and all 3 of us got COVID literally within days of each other. My symptoms were not severe. I didn't have a fever or anything like that. I just had a cough that went straight to my lungs and then persisted for a few weeks. And then I started experiencing nausea and like weird lingering symptoms involving proteins and protein intolerances. Proteins that I've been eating for over 40 years with no issues whatsoever. Suddenly, after I had COVID, my body is not able to process chicken, beef, and eggs. After about a year of that, I was like, okay, well, you know, there are worse things that can happen to me apart from, oh, I can't eat chicken, beef, or eggs, you know. I could still eat seafood and pork, and seafood is an odd one because technically it throws up a whole bunch of histamine. So on paper, it should bother me, right, if it's really some kind of an allergy to proteins. And yet, for some reason, it doesn't bother me, like, at all. I can eat all sorts of seafood, and I'm fine. I initially did go and get my first 2 vaccinations. I got Pfizer jabs both times, and those actually alleviated some of my symptoms that I had for about a year at that point. I even had a burger, I think, after a few weeks following my first jab. But unfortunately, those effects waned, and I was once again reacting mostly to chicken, beef, but then also turkey, and, you know, just really weird stuff. Now, fast forward to only about 3 or 4 months after I received my second jab, I decided to go have a booster. But at the time, my father, who was 75, had hip surgery, so he was in hospital. I kind of wanted to go and visit him. Now, obviously, I didn't want to risk the lives of my elderly parents, right? And around about the same time, we also had a lovely litter of puppies that were completely planned, and we kept them all. So obviously I wanted to be healthy for them. But unfortunately, 24 hours later, literally 24 hours after my booster, my skin started breaking out in a weird rash. First on the side of my neck, and then I sort of had a few weird hot spots, which ultimately erupted into a full-blown shingles attack within 3 days. At the time, doctors here in the UK were still refusing to see anyone face to face unless you were imminently dying. So I had a consult over the phone where the doctor completely dismissed my suspicion of a shingles outbreak. She talked over me the whole time. She told me I must have allergies that I didn't know about. She told me I'm too young to have shingles at like 42, and with the allergies thing, I actually never suffered from any major allergies. The only allergy that I ever had was a nickel allergy. So anyways, she kind of dismissed me, and she said, oh, it's extremely unlikely, and blah, blah, blah. So she prescribed me an antihistamine called fexofenadine, and that did nothing. Like nothing. I was miserable. By the time that I spoke to my second doctor, the shingles outbreak was already in full swing. And even though the next doctor asked for pictures and concluded it was shingles, it was too late. Apparently, if you don't catch it within like the first 72 hours, there's this thing that happens with the viral load, and it gets too much for the existing medication to help. So you kind of have to leave it up to your immune system and your own body to fight it out. So I tried to do that for a month, but the shingles were not going away. I was stuck in this cycle of almost healing, and then another few blisters would come out. So I begged the doctor. I begged him. I was like, please give me something. I can't live like this. This is ridiculous. I can't leave the house. I can't walk. I can't do anything. That doctor did give me EMLA cream, codeine, and a very high dosage of the antivirals, with a warning to keep an eye on my kidneys because it's such a high dose that my kidneys may fail. So he kind of explained to me what to look out for. Luckily, I tolerated it well. I mean, I had a little bit of change in the kidney function, but nothing serious. Now, that helped a little bit, right? I was still going through these cycles of almost healing and then another outbreak, and that lasted for like another 4 or 5 months. Whenever I would stop the medication, the bloody shingles would start coming back. And again, around about this time, I started experiencing severe fatigue. Severe. Like, I can't even explain it. It's not like it's totally different from just being tired or overly tired because you haven't slept for a while. No, I was always able to stay awake really for a really long time and to work like 16-hour days perfectly normally. But now I was down to like 4 hours of usable energy per day before I would have to have a nap. And I'm not somebody who ever napped. Even when I was a kid, I don't even sleep when I'm supposed to, and now suddenly I need a nap at noon when I've only been up for 4 hours. It was absolutely ridiculous. So I was struggling. I started struggling mentally as well. I'm a pretty strong person normally, but this whole thing was just getting to me. I've got a business that I really enjoy, and I absolutely adore what I do, but I had to modify my entire existence just to be able to function somewhat. I was going to bed at like 7:30 p.m. and I used to be a night owl. Like 3 a.m. easy, right? Suddenly I'm going to bed at 7:30 p.m. and I'm sleeping all the way through to the next day until like 8, 9 a.m. It was just like totally out of character. And then add that to my 2 to 3 hour naps that I would have in the day. And so I tried to get in touch with the doctors again, only to be told to try and rest, have plenty of fluids, and try to exercise, which was like, totally the wrong advice to be given when I found out what was actually wrong with me and how to handle it. But I also said, I'm already sleeping for 16 hours a day. Like, how much do you want me to rest? And then as all of that was happening, I also noticed that I was getting winded and breathless going up one set of stairs in my house. I was an athlete before all of this. My hobby was bodybuilding competitions, so I won quite a few of them. And I love the sport, I love training, I love the mental discipline. But obviously with this new condition, I was barely able to, walk to the bathroom, let alone go to the gym. But still, because the doctor said, try and exercise because it's going to help, I did try going back to the gym. Now, I'm the sort of person who's either all in or nothing. So I either go every day as a part of my daily habit, or I don't do anything, okay? Thinking that I'm going to go back to my old days and my old self, I started going to the gym, and on day 4, I could barely get off the floor in the gym. It was really quite, I just had this, feeling of extreme weakness. And then for the next 2 weeks, I was miserable. At one point, I had to use an airbed and sleep downstairs because I just couldn't navigate the staircase anymore. It was very difficult for me to go up and down the stairs. In my head, I was like, it's because I haven't done cardio in a while. But it wasn't. It turned out that I had something called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia as well, which is all a part of long COVID, actually. While all this is happening, every time I came across a physical problem, I tried to push through it because that's what I did my entire life. Later on, I was looking at some videos and some treatment advice, And this condition usually happens to type A personalities, which is what I am. I'm an overachiever. I have a lot of skills. I do a lot of those well because I always push those skills to expert levels. This condition doesn't really affect people who kind of chill at the weekends and, you kind of take it easy in life. No, it's always us who are quite ambitious. We've got a ton of drive. We want to do a lot of things in life. And precisely because of our mindset, the disease that is really very similar to dysautonomia, and there's actually some research out there that says that long COVID and dysautonomia are one and the same thing. It basically just means that whenever you try and push through, you push yourself deeper into the disease. Now, before all this, I used to like having a few drinks here and there, especially at dinner when you're out. You have a couple of glasses of wine. Usually they're big glasses, you enjoy yourself, social, all of that stuff. Well, on one evening, I actually tried to have about 4 drinks over dinner, which was probably about 6 hours. Like, it's not like I smashed down 4 drinks all at once. And the next 2 days, I had the worst hangover ever. I was so dead. Like, I spent 2 days on my kitchen floor with the garden door open. I've never been so sick. So naturally, because of that, I stopped drinking altogether, thinking, oh, this is some weird alcohol intolerance, probably to go along with this disease and whatever. So I didn't drink. But one thing that I didn't try doing was using alcohol, like, medicinally. So at this point, I'm pretty sure that I'm suffering from long COVID, post-viral fatigue, as well as vaccine injury of some sort. But then I was looking up online, and none of those forums that were around at that point were helpful to me. Somehow I just wasn't coming across the research that was being done, but somehow it wasn't in the mainstream, I guess. And also the forums that I was reading about, it was all people who had actual organ damage. My symptoms compared to those people were mild. I just had fatigue, my quality of life was affected, but I didn't have myocarditis. I didn't have kidney or liver damage. In fact, I did the blood work and all of it was quite unremarkable. It was normal. I didn't have vitamin deficiencies, nothing. And that honestly surprised me because I was expecting to see something that was out of order, and yet it wasn't. So yeah, it was obviously doctors were just completely dismissive because everything came back normal. Now, I'm usually on a keto diet, like away from long COVID and stuff. I've actually been on it since 2016 with only kind of occasional breaks. But for the last Christmas, because I was, suffering from all of this, I kind of thought I'd relax a little bit. So all last year, actually, I was a bit undisciplined because I went to see my mom. My dad actually died last January, so obviously I started going to see my mom a little bit more frequently. And my mom, like, bless her heart, she is great, but she just doesn't get the whole no carbs thing. So it's very difficult to stay on keto when mom is cooking, and then she cooks something really nice and then I go, oh, I can't eat that. So, I was kind of a little bit lax with my nutrition. And then around Christmas, I went absolutely crazy and just indulged myself for 2 weeks. And then I crashed badly. Like, my heart rate was suddenly all over the place. And because my heart rate would jump as soon as I was in the upright position, I would wake up at night to let my dogs out, and then I couldn't go back to sleep. So now, not only am I trying to sleep a lot, but I'm kind of sleeping in sort of 2-3 hour chunks, and I'm constantly tired, even more tired than I already am from the chronic fatigue syndrome. So then I started experiencing dread and anxiety over my day. Because, lying down in bed, I have things to do. I can't just give my life up. I can't just lay in bed. That's just not an option. So again, I was trying to push through all of that, which was the wrong thing to do. Now, the thing that started changing for me was in January, so right after the Christmas crash. It was my husband's birthday, and I decided to have just one drink. Just one. A small glass of Korean plum wine. So the next day, I wake up feeling normal. So that baffled me. I got on Google Dr. Google, and everything I read pointed to alcohol making long COVID and chronic fatigue much worse. Not one site in one paper examined the potential, blood thinning effects of medicinal alcohol dosages. Not one. Now, obviously, there are people out there with alcoholic tendencies, and they can't stop at one drink. But, I'm not one of those people. I was never a massive drinker anyway. So I started researching to see whether somebody else had the same experience. Small doses of alcohol helping you with chronic fatigue. The only video that came up was from a woman named Raelan, who recovered from chronic fatigue. And then in this one video, she said that while she was drinking, because at some point she was like, I can't just live like this. So she would actually go out, force herself to go out. And while she was drinking, she said that she had energy and felt normal. That was the only account of somebody saying they had the same thing and alcohol made them feel better. Now, she also didn't stop at one, so she experienced horrible hangovers. But in my eyes, I was like, hold on a minute. Why don't I just try doing just like one drink every day, see what happens? And it started helping. It somewhat gave me my life back. While I was going through Raelan's videos, she does a lot of stuff on chronic fatigue, and eventually she started doing interviews and podcasts with doctors. And actually, there is a disorder called dysautonomia that affects the autonomic nervous systems. And there are now studies that show that long COVID and this dysautonomia are actually pretty similar, if not the same. Dysautonomia is a disorder of the autonomic nervous systems, aka ANS. ANS controls all of your involuntary functions. So heart rate, blood pressure, metabolism, bladder control, sleep, like anything that you do involuntarily, it is controlled by the ANS. So naturally, when that starts dysfunctioning, you get a whole bunch of weird symptoms that are very difficult to control, because it's not like, oh, you pop a pill and it's done. You actually have to do a lot of self-reflection. You have to pace yourself. And it's just a difficult, mentally difficult thing to do, to just stop yourself from wanting to do stuff and knowing that you will be punished for it. It's now been around 2 months. Yeah, around 2 months since I found all of this out. I found some stuff that works for me. Am I recovered? No, far from it. I still have most of my days in the week where I'm not feeling that great, but I do have a couple of days when I do feel normal. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. I was able to find a few things that made a difference almost immediately. Now, I have a mix of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is, again, a part of dysautonomia. It's not my heart that's dysfunctioning, it's the ANS dysfunction. I obviously have a lot of chronic fatigue and some signs of another condition called MCAS, which stands for mast cell activation syndrome. And that's because of my digestive issues that I've experienced with these proteins. However, mine is probably not, the MCAS side is probably pretty mild from what I've seen out there, the kind of problems that people have. Like, some people can't eat any sort of protein at all. So I'm going to lay out all the stuff that helped me the most. The first thing was diet, nutrition. I said I've been on a ketogenic diet since 2016, but when I went off of it, obviously it was very noticeable that my energy levels were terrible, to the point that I was literally just in bed, couldn't do anything. My legs just felt like they were made out of lead. As soon as I went back to keto, I noticed the energy levels were much better. I also saw a lot of videos of other people suffering from chronic fatigue, and they reported the same thing, that anytime they went low carb or even keto, their symptoms improved. So it's not just me, okay? But I do have to say that I am a carbaholic, so as soon as I have one piece of bread, that somehow turns into chips, then turns into other junk and into full-fat Coke and a whole bunch of other things. And, it's just not good. It becomes a case of, hide the biscuits, D is coming. So that's why I remain keto. It's just so much easier if I don't have those triggers. But like I said, last year I was a bit undisciplined. And it was really noticeable. I go off keto, I crash almost immediately, like literally within a couple of days. I can barely get out of bed. So that would be my first choice. Look at your diet, try to clean up your diet, try to just focus on whatever you can eat, like protein, vegetables, complex carbs if you can do it. But try to minimize the carbohydrates in general. The second thing that helped is that I stopped trying to exercise, at least for this first part of the recovery. So anything that stresses out your nervous system seems to push this illness deeper and deeper instead of helping. Our bodies, the chronic fatigue bodies, are not the same. They don't react the same to sort of graded exercise like a normal body would. In fact, whenever you try to exercise, you get worse. So clearly you have to hang back from that and just wait until you can do stuff on an everyday basis. I'm still not there. I try and, I try and tidy up around the house and then that's it. That's the only thing I can do for the day. And then I need to sleep. So, small steps. The next thing that made a huge amount of difference to my heart rate was compression socks. I didn't believe how much difference this made. So now, as soon as I wake up, I just put them on, and the compression socks just help my body to pump the blood up towards my heart rather than kind of pooling in my ankles. That's definitely something to try if you're noticing you're breathless and that you can't walk for very long, or that climbing the stairs in particular is very difficult. It's probably not you being unfit. It's probably a form of POTS. Because from what I've seen, most long COVID sufferers have a degree of POTS, the postural orthostatic tachycardia. The third thing that helped me was EMDR sessions. I don't know whether you've heard about it, but basically the EMDR is when you're targeting negative emotions and then replacing them with positive emotions whilst moving your eyes left and right, because it's something to do with this lateral eye movement that tells your subconscious mind that you're safe. A part of this long COVID problem is that your fight or flight response gets kind of stuck. Your sympathetic nervous system is always in overdrive. So naturally pacing yourself, doing meditation, and dealing with any anxiety or dread that you might have, either over your new condition, because us type A personalities, we find it very hard to slow down. So you have to actually tell yourself that it's okay, that this is not going to be forever, it's just going to be now. For me right now, some days are better than others, but whenever I feel anxiety or dread over having something to do on a day when I wake up and I don't feel good, I try to do an EMDR session. And it's difficult because sometimes they are very tiring. So I kind of try and do them towards the end of the day, because then I can just stop and, cry or whatever, go to sleep. But it does help. It's very effective. And what's really important is that it affects you really quickly. It's something that I never believed is going to make that much difference with this condition, but it really does. For everything, mindset. You can even use it to deal with traumas if you've had some previously, because there is a degree of trauma-related stuff that goes into long COVID. So obviously, if you can deal with that, you will find ways to deal with this newfound condition. I would also advise you that you start running a journal of how you feel, because it's incredibly important. This condition is, like I said, it's not something you can take a pill for necessarily and just kind of be done with it, forget about it. It's really about working with your body, working with your mind rather than against them. So if there is a silver lining here, is definitely the fact that you tend to learn more about what feels good to you, when you're overdoing it, and when you should maybe give yourself a bit of a break. It certainly made me more aware about the fact that I'm pretty harsh with myself, and a lot of the times I just ignore the warning signs. I ignore my level of tiredness, any adrenal fatigue, I just kind of push through it. But let's talk some supplements, because there are a few things that did help, and they do make a bit of difference. I started taking Ubiquinol to a much higher dosage than I used to, and D-Ribose. D-Ribose is instrumental in creating the cell fuel called ATP. I wouldn't say it's like, oh wow, you have so much energy now, but they get you out of that heavy feeling of just being weak. Shopping for groceries for me is still a little bit tough, so whenever I can, I try to have most of it delivered. I take 10 grams of D-Ribose per day and about 1,800 milligrams of Ubiquinol. For reference, I weigh about 49 kilos, which is around 108 pounds, I think. Now, finally, the last thing that is really helping me is a blend of two very special enzymes. One is called nattokinase. It is a good type of bacteria from a Japanese food that's caused by a fermentation process. It's very safe, like literally natto is something that Japanese have been eating for like hundreds of years as a part of their regular diet. So yeah, it's pretty safe. And the other one, the second enzyme, is the interesting one. It's called Serrapeptase, and it's actually derived from a Japanese silk bug. It's the enzyme that it uses to break out of its cocoon. And in fact, any insect that uses metamorphosis to grow into like the next stage, moths, butterflies. I mean, butterflies are just really pretty moths, aren't they? But they all use this serrapeptase enzyme to break out of their cocoons. So there's a theory floating around that long COVID might also be caused by microclots and or the virus hiding in the nerve endings of the autonomic nervous system. The jury's still out whether it's one, the other, or both. But, it would make sense why it causes like a whole bunch of weird issues and mystery symptoms. The great thing about serrapeptase is that it only dissolves fibrous dead tissues. In fact, both of them only dissolve dead tissues. They do not touch anything living. Personally, I use doctor's best combination of the two. And out of all the pills that I've tried, and trust me, I've spent so much time, effort, and money looking at things that might help, this was the only one that actually made a difference. Serrapeptase is actually given to stroke victims sometimes instead of aspirin because it has blood thinning properties. So naturally, if you have any kind of blood clotting disorder or blood disorder in general, you need to talk to your doctor before you take this. But for the rest of us, it seems to be pretty safe. There are some studies out there. I'm not sure how good they are, but apparently they were double-blind studies. And they did find improvements in long COVID and CFS patients already on day 4. Now, I will tell you my first-hand experience with it. I've been taking it now for over a month, and on day 3, I already noticed something different. My legs didn't feel like lead upon waking up. Now, on day 5, I did experience something weird. It was almost like some kind of a tremor. My teeth were kind of chittering as if I was cold, but I wasn't cold, and my whole body kind of had some kind of a shake going on, and that lasted for about an hour. And that evening, I felt completely normal for the first time in 3 years. So there's something there. I do notice when I don't take it for 24 hours, my energy levels start to drop. So maybe it's like a short-acting thing. Now I'm experimenting with 2 pills a day because apparently a lot of the serrapeptase improvements need to be done with a certain clinical dosage, and a lot of the pills that are being sold underdose massively. But you have to do it slowly because otherwise it's going to start clearing out some stuff and it's going to make you feel really terrible. So take it slow. So where am I now? Well, I have good days, I have bad days, but I have a pretty good idea on how to manage myself when I need to do something. I do give myself plenty of rest, a lot more than I used to anyway. And I am hoping that this enzyme will eventually help me to break out of my long COVID cocoon just like a butterfly and, get me back to the land of living. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. In fact, I'm probably as far from it as you can possibly be. But it does seem like they might have been right on the certain aspects of the vaccines. So maybe they deserve a win. Just one. If all this information can help anyone else living with long COVID, ME, CFS, or vaccine injury, that's why I did this video. Because I don't think there's enough mainstream information about these conditions. Like I said, I'm not recovered, but, I believe I'm well on the way. So that's it for now. Thank you for sticking around until the end. Let's get healthy.